The Mercury 13. The year is 1960, and the space race between America and Russia is in full force. Russia was in the lead, having already sent off Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite, and Laika the dog, the first living animal into space in 1957. In response to these accomplishments, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, selected a group of 7 men in 1958 to lead the charge in American spaceflight, known as the Mercury 7. Shortly thereafter, in 1960, a NASA associate involved with the selection process of the Mercury 7, William Randolph Lovelace II, privately established the Mercury 13, which selected 13 experienced women, most of whom were already experienced pilots, to be flats, the First Lady astronaut trainees. These women included Jerry Cobb, the first to be recruited. Cobb was an experienced pilot who had 20 years of airplane experience under her belt, working as an instructor, airplane race champion, crop duster, ferry pilot, patrol pilot, and charter pilot. Cobb was the first to pass all 3 stages of testing, going on to help recruit other skilled women into the program. Sarah Gorlick. Gorlick had a degree in math and chemistry, and at just 18 had already participated in the Civil Air Patrol and gotten her CFI, Certified Flight Instructor license. Wally Funk. Funk was the youngest member of the group at age 21. Funk had a background at the military base Fort Hill as a civilian flight instructor. Funk placed second in overall testing, sitting right behind Jerry Cobb. Ernest B. Trimble Stedman, a 37-year-old airport manager. Irene Liverton. Liverton had 16 years and over 6,000 hours of flying experience before the program. She was a charter pilot at a corporate job based in Santa Monica, California. Upon being recruited to the Mercury 13, her boss, who disapproved, removed her of her CFI before she left. Jane B. Hart. Hart was the oldest of all of them at age 40. Hart had a CFI, was the first female pilot in Michigan, had experience flying helicopters, and was married to Senator Philip Hart. Myrtle K. Cagle. Cagle had been flying since she was 12 years old and was experienced enough to teach the remainder of an aeronautics class after her instructor left, all while she was only 16 years old. Rhea Hurl Woltman. Hurl towed gliders for the Air Force Academy as well as receiving a multi-engine rating, allowing her to pilot aircraft containing more than one engine. She received a letter of recruitment in 1961. Jan and Marion Dietrich. Jan and Marion Dietrich were identical twins, both with degrees from the University of California. After graduating, the twins broke off into their own interests. Jan became a flight instructor and a commercial pilot, while Marion decided to pursue a career in journalism, becoming a writer and reporter while still having an interest in flying in her spare time. All the same, however, both were recruited by Lovelace into the Mercury 13 program. Jerry Sloan Trehill. Sloan, who had been testing the first infrared and terrain-following radar, was then called by Jerry Cobb herself for recruitment in the Mercury 13. She joined the program in 1961. Janora Stumbaugh. Stumbaugh was a college student at the University of Oklahoma. After turning 24, she sent a request to join the program. At the same time, Jessen was unaware that the test could potentially lead to her becoming an astronaut. Jessen was one of the last 2 to be recruited. And finally, Jean Hickson. Hickson was likely the most experienced member of the group, having served in the WASPs, which is the women's branch of the Army Air Force during World War II. After serving, she became a schoolteacher in Ohio along with working as a flight instructor. Tests. The Mercury 13 were all subject to a series of tests. These tests were used to determine whether these women would be physically capable of the unknown stresses of spaceflight. Each set of tests were divided into phases. Phase 1 of testing included X-rays, blood tests, eye exams, urine tests, radiation tests, physical tests, a vertigo test, which involved shooting ice-cold water into the inner ear to freeze it and waiting to see how long it took to recover. This test could cause major damage to the ear, causing hearing loss or complete loss of hearing. And a reflex test. In this test, an electric needle was inserted into the ulnar nerve, a nerve in the arm connected to the sensation in the ring and pinky finger, to test reflexes. Shockingly enough, these were only placement tests. Initially, 24 invitations were sent out to various women to participate in this phase of testing, and only 18 participated. Of the 18, only 13 women, those mentioned prior, completed Phase 1 and proceeded on to Phase 2. Phase 2 of testing involved testing mental strength. One of the ways they tested this was through sensory deprivation. Each of the women was placed in a sensory deprivation tank alone. They were tested to see how long they'd last with no sight and no sound, floating in a small pool. Wally Funk, who lasted in sensory deprivation for 10 hours and 35 minutes, was quoted saying, "There was no light, there was no noise, there was nothing. I couldn't tell up from down." 3 women completed Phase 2 of testing, that being Jerry Cobb, Wally Funk, and Rhea Hurl. Phase 3 of testing would have taken place over the spring and summer of 1961 and would have been flight simulation tests. I say would have, as none, with the exception of Jerry Cobb, officially completed Phase 3. Despite all of Mercury 13's amazing results in the field of testing, none of the last two Mercury 13 members completed Phase 3 of testing, as Phase 3, and subsequently the program, had been prematurely cancelled. Cancellation. The Navy had sent letters to each of the Mercury 13 informing them of this cancellation, just a mere 6 days before they were to begin testing. Cobb, along with Jane Hart, fought this decision, eventually meeting with the Vice President at the time, Lyndon Johnson, to discuss the cancellation. After Cobb and Hart had discussed the cancellation with Johnson, he, unbeknownst to Cobb and Hart, wrote the words, "Let's stop this now," over their petition. There was a lot of speculation as to why the Mercury 13 was cancelled. Sexism was a heavy thought in many minds as one of the main reasons why. During a court hearing discussing the matter, Mercury 7 member John Glenn had this to say: "I think this gets back to the way our social order is organized. Really, it is just a fact. The men go off and fight the wars and fly the airplanes and come back and help design and build and test them. The fact that women are not in this field is a fact of our social order." While sexism did very likely play a part in its cancellation, their gender wasn't the only reason NASA wouldn't have let the project continue, as under NASA's requirements, all spaceflight candidates had to have been military test pilots. Despite the Mercury 13's highly successful accomplishments and results, the program was disbanded in 1962. Afterwards, Wally Funk. Thankfully, the story of the Mercury 13 doesn't end there. 59 years later, in July of 2021, Wally Funk, one of the most successful flat candidates, finally got her time in space at age 82. Funk became the oldest astronaut in space, taking the record from the previous record holder, Mercury 7 member John Glenn. Upon completing her flight, Wally Funk had this to say: "I've been waiting a long time. I want to go again, fast. I feel so lucky that my dream has come true."